Episode 1, The Midnight Rule. They warned me, never stay past midnight, but I thought faith would protect me. I arrived in Graveshollow on a Wednesday. Cold wind, cracked roads, and eyes that watched from behind stitch curtains. The bishop had told me it was a quiet village in need of a fresh shepherd. No mention of the church's rule, no mention of the disappearances. St. Ethel stood like a scar in the heart of Toundry stone. Crooked spire, and a bell tower that never rang. The stained glass windows didn't catch light. They absorbed it. I remember thinking, this place has forgotten joy. On my first night, after the townsfolk left Sunday Mass in silence, an old man stayed behind. His eyes were fogged, like cataracts of dust. Father Elijah, he whispered, you must never be inside this church after midnight. I smiled politely. Is that tradition? He didn't smile back. It's a warning. That was the first time I heard of the midnight rule. Curiosity is a sin I confess often. So, on my third night, I locked myself inside. No candles, no prayers, just silence. And that ancient wood groaning like it remembered every footstep that had walked it wrong. Midnight came without drama, just a stillness so unnatural. Even the death stopped dancing. 12:01, I waited. 12:05, my breath grew louder than the wind. Then it changed. The church began breathing, not metaphorically. I mean the pews creaked in rhythm. The altar cloth fluttered without air. Somewhere behind me, the sound of someone kneeling echoed across stone. But when I turned, nothing. Then the whisper came, not from the pulpit, not from the shadows. It came from underneath, a voice so dry, it crumbled as it spoke. You opened the door. I was sure of it. But the back door of the church, sealed for decades, stood wide open. Cold poured in, but not the kind that comes with weather. It was the cold of a place that never knew sunlight. A darkness not empty, but occupied. I stepped forward. One step. Two. The shadows behind the open door shifted. A figure, kneeling, just like me. Same color, same cross, same eyes. It was me. And he was mouthing something over and over again. Leave before he notices. The bell above me rang once. I don't remember unlocking the front door. I don't remember how I got home, but I woke up on the church floor. At 5:17 a.m., the door was closed. The figure was gone, and carved into the wood near the altar were fresh words. Still bleeding. You stayed. I thought faith would protect me. I was wrong. Tomorrow, I will ask the townspeople what happened to the last priest, and why his grave has no date of death. Episode 2. The woman who sang backwards. She never spoke a word, only sang, and the song unmade me. Sunday evening, the pews filled again, faces stiff, mouths quiet, hands folded so tightly I could see the whites of their knuckles. No greetings, no warmth. They entered as if walking into confession for sins they hadn't yet committed. But then there was her. She Saturday in the far left corner, third pew from the back, head wrapped in a veil of dust-white lace. Face never lifted. She never blinked, never moved until the hymns began. And when they did, she sang backwards. I don't mean the lyrics were confusing or out of tone. I mean backwards. Every word, from end to beginning. Her voice twisted in on itself, like a serpent biting its own tongue. The others ignored her. Eyes down, pretending not to hear. But I heard. I felt. Her voice scraped the back of my teeth, slithered behind my ribs. I had to stop mid-sermon to steady my breath. After service, I approached her. Madam, I said softly, may I help you? She didn't speak, just slowly turned her head. Her eyes were sealed shut, but tears leaked from beneath the lids, black and thick like tar. She opened her mouth. I expected words, a name, a groan, but she began to sing again a new verse, older, sadder, and somehow closer to me than my own skin. It wasn't in any language I knew, but I understood. It was a warning. That night, I reviewed the church's archives, dusty records, yellow paper, unbaptized secrets. A page from 1912 stood out. A sermon note. The woman returned again. Her husband drowned in the well beneath the altar. She hasn't spoken since, but her mouth is not empty. I didn't sleep. At 11:58 p.m., I returned to the church. She was already there, alone, facing the altar. The candlelight trembled when I entered, though the air was still. And then, At the stroke of midnight, her voice erupted in a loud, not chaotic, but clean, like a knife slicing silk. Her backwards song echoed across the pews, and the statues cried, "I mean it!" The Virgin's eyes wept streaks of red. Saint Peter cracked a marble finger against his chest, and the crucifix above the altar turned upside down. Slowly, as if bowing to something beneath us, I stumbled forward. My ears rang with something sharp like the scream of a star collapsing. "Who are you?" I whispered. She stopped. Her mouth moved in silence, but in reverse. "And, 10, she screamed in a voice that shattered every stained glass window. "You already know me." I woke up hours later on the church steps, blood from both ears, every window repaired, the pew where she sat her day, gone, replaced by raw, blackened wood, burnt from the inside out, and my Bible lying open on my chest now had a new passage handwritten in red. "Do not sing with her. Her song is not of this world. Tomorrow, I'll search beneath the altar. They say there's no well there, but I don't believe them anymore." Episode 3, The Pew That Bleeds. You can wipe it away, scrub it clean, even pray over it, but the blood always comes back. It was the carpenter who told me. He came on a Monday morning to repair the shattered glass. Quiet man, thick hands, eyes like a soldier who'd seen more than war. As he swept the last pieces from the aisle, he paused by the third pew on the left. "You ever sit here, Father?" he asked. I shook my head. "Don't." I looked. Just a wooden bench like the others, worn smooth by decades of devotion, but very near the edge was a dark stain. It hadn't been there yesterday. The carpenter ran a gloved hand across the wood and showed me his palm. Wet, fresh. I asked him, trembling. "Paint." He looked me dead in the eye. I stopped believing that 2 years ago. I returned that evening with holy water and cloth, sprinkled, scrubbed, prayed. The stain lifted, though the wood underneath groaned, like it didn't want to let go. I left the cloth on the altar and locked the doors behind me. I returned just before dawn. The blood was back, but this time, it had spread a thin line down the backrest, dripping in a slow arc toward the floor, like something had been dragged across it. I leaned closer. Names were carved there now. 5, jagged, barely visible in the grain. One of them was mine, Elijah. That night, I placed a camera in the corner of the chapel. I wanted proof. I wanted answers. At 11:59 p.m., the footage is clear. Empty pews, candles flicker, 12M frame distorts, not static, something darker, like the lens is being watched from the inside. 12:02, movement. A figure steps into view, but there's no sound of the door opening. The figure wears a priest's collar, head bowed. It walks slowly toward the pew, my pew, and sits. 12:04 for the bleeding begins. From the figure's chest, a slow drip, right over the heart. It seeps into the wood, bubbling like the wood is drinking it. A 12:06 the figure turns toward the camera and smiles. "It's me. I burned the tape. I don't know why. Fear doesn't always make sense." That afternoon, I met the oldest woman in Graveshollow, Sister Marla. She hasn't stepped foot in the church since 1971. "Why did you leave?" I asked. She held up her trembling hand. "No one leaves," she said. "We were all bled out, one by one. You think that pew is cursed?" I nodded. She shook her head. "That's not a curse, Father. That's a seed." "For who?" She leaned in. "For the one who never died. Tonight, I'll sit there myself. Maybe it wants to finish writing my name. Maybe it wants to tell me why I bled before I was born. All I know is the blood comes back. And this time, it's mine." Episode 4, The Bell That Rings From Below. When the bell tolls at midnight, it's not calling heaven, it's warning hell. The bell tower at St. Ethel's had been silent for decades. Or so I thought. No one ever climbed it. The rope was torn, the mechanism rusted and dead. And yet every night at precisely 12:01 a.m., the bell would ring once. Not loud, not grand, just hello, as if someone were ringing it from beneath the ground. I asked around. "Old acoustics," said one of the altar boys. When pressure offered a man who hadn't looked me in the eye since my first sermon, Sister Marla just whispered, "It's him knocking." But no one dared explain who him was. So I climbed. At 11:30 p.m., lantern in hand, I stepped into the tower spiral staircase. The air changed instantly, not just colder, heavier, the kind of weight you feel in catacombs or locked confessionals, where secrets hang like fog. I reached the top. The bell was still, dust covered, cobwebs across the clapper like a crucifix veiled in sin. No wind, no vibration, no trick of acoustics. I turned to leave, but boo, the bell rung right in front of me, but it didn't move. My vision blurred. The floor groaned above, but below, a pulse rose from under the wood, as if something ancient had turned over in its sleep. I dropped to my knees, not in prayer, in terror. The bell rang again, but this time, not in my ears, in my bones. My lantern shattered, and I saw them, hands, pale, rotted hands reaching up from the cracks in the floorboards, clawing from beneath the tower, bloodless and desperate. I backed away, heart racing. A whisper slid along the stone wall behind me. The bell doesn't ring to call you, it rings to mark who stayed. I ran, tripped, fell, slammed shoulder first down the stairs. I woke on the ground floor, gasping, just as the bell tolled a third time. Back in my room, I examined the old blueprints. The tower had no foundation listed, just air, a void, and beneath that, a single word, handwritten in the margin, chamber. No measurements, no access points, just a warning scrawled beneath it in red ink. Do not open what was never sealed. I asked the carpenter about it. He didn't speak, just showed me his hand trapped in bandages. Did you hear them working on the bell? I asked. He shook his head. No, he whispered. I heard the bell before I ever saw the church. It was inside my dreams. Now, I wake each night at 12:01 a.m. Even when the bell doesn't ring, I hear it anyway, not above me, but below, calling something I fear will one day answer. Episode 5. The girl in the white veil. She came every night dressed for a wedding, but no one ever saw the groom. Until I looked in the mirror. She first appeared during the Tuesday evening prayer. Small, barefoot, dressed in white, a veil covered her face like smoke caught in silk. She stood at the back pew, perfectly still, as if she were part of the furniture. No one else seemed to notice her, but I did. And when the service ended and the faithful shuffled out in silence, she remained, facing the altar, waiting. Are you lost? I asked gently. She didn't move, didn't speak, but she lifted her veil, slowly, deliberately, and I forgot how to breathe. There was no face, only the impression of one like flesh had been erased and smoothed into a blank canvas of skin. But where the mouth should be, there was a stitched, bleeding cross. I stumbled back. Her hands rose and clasped together as if in prayer. Then she turned toward the confessional booth and walked in, trailing drops of something pale and shimmering behind her. Not blood, wax. I followed. The booth door creaked open behind her, but no one emerged. I waited and waited. 10 minutes passed. I opened it. She was gone, but where she Saturday? A single white rose bloomed from the wooden bench's petals weeping wax. Later, in the rectory, I searched every parish record. Nothing. No missing girls, no funerals, no weddings. Only a short note from 1948. She comes dressed for a marriage heaven refused to bless. Do not speak to her. Do not look beneath the veil. I had already done both. That night, I dreamed of her. We stood at the altar together. I in my collar, she in her veil. The church was empty except for a mirror hanging behind the cross. And in the mirror I wasn't wearing my collar. I wore a groom's suit, smiling, bleeding from the eyes, and holding her handless hand. I woke to find my bedroom mirror cracked from the inside. A message was etched into the fogged glass. You already said yes. At 11:57 p.m., I returned to the church. I needed to end it. I found her at the altar, waiting, and beside her, a man, dressed like me, but older, rotting, hollow-eyed. He turned and whispered, "Thank you for saying the vows I never could." Then he stepped into me, not walked past me, stepped into me. I screamed, but her stitched mouth opened wide and zipping, and her voice wasn't a sound. It was a prayer, one I had never learned, but my lips began to recite. I woke on the church floor again, alone, except for the rose on my chest, and a ring on my finger, burning cold. Tomorrow, I will search the crypt. They say no weddings ever took place here, but something was buried, dressed in white, and it's still waiting for the groom. Episode 6, Confession After Midnight. He came to confess sins that should never have been remembered because he was already dead. The church was closed, the doors locked, candles extinguished, but at 12:03 a.m., I heard the knock, 3 slow taps on the confessional door. I had left it open, just in case. No one should have been there. No footsteps, no breathing, and yet, someone was waiting in the booth, silhouette barely visible behind the mesh screen. He wore a hat, a trench coat, his hands if they were hands stood still as stone on his knees. I sat down opposite him. The air turned dry, the walls hummed like they were listening. Then he spoke, voice raspy. "Hello, forgive me, Father, for I remember what I was never meant to." My fingers gripped the crucifix on my chest. "How long has it been since your last confession?" He was quiet. Then, 74 years. That couldn't be right. "And what is it you wish to confess?" He leaned closer. I could smell earth and something older than decay. I heard his voice, in a place where even angels do not walk. My throat tightened. He continued, "They buried me with the others, beneath the church floor. But we weren't dead yet, not all of us. We were the ones who stayed after midnight." My blood went cold. "You're saying I'm not the first priest to hear the bell?" He interrupted. "I was like you, curious, brave, foolish." He paused, then whispered, "We all end up in the walls." I rose. This was madness, some twisted prank, but my feet wouldn't move. He chuckled, dry as paper tearing. "Do you want to know the truth about the church?" I said nothing. He reached through the screen. Not a hand, a bone, wrapped in wet cloth, carved with tiny verses in reverse. I gasped. He placed it gently on the floor between us, then said, softly, almost kindly, "You're not hearing God, Father. You're hearing what's left of him." The booth went dark. I opened the door. No one was there, just empty air. No hat, no coat, no voice, but the bone remained still damp, still etched, still warm. I brought it to the rectory, and there, in the oldest church records, I found his name, Father Damien Carr, ordained 1949, vanished 1951, buried with no ceremony, no coffin, just a note in the margin. Did not die, sealed away. Tonight, I placed the bone beneath the altar, wrapped it in linen, and prayed for him, not to go to heaven, but to finally stay dead. But at 12:03, the knock came again. Same rhythm, same booth, same voice. "Forgive me, Father, for I remember what you forgot." Episode 7, The Altar That Whispers. It didn't whisper scripture. It whispered my name and things no one should ever know. Altars are meant to be sacred, still, silent, anchored in devotion. But ours breathes. I first noticed it during a Tuesday Mass. The candles flared when I approached, not with wind of resistance, as if the air itself recoiled. Then the whispers began, faint, like breath caught between stone and shadow. At first I thought it was a draft, but it said my name, not Father Elijah, just Elijah, as if whatever was under that altar had known me before I ever believed. That night, I stayed after midnight. The nave was empty, but the silence felt crowded. I knelt before the altar and closed my eyes. "If you speak," I whispered, "then speak clearly." For a moment nothing. Then the stone beneath my knees warmed. A voice, gentle and blasphemously intimate, crawled into my left ear. "Do you want to know the truth, Elijah, or just enough to keep lying to yourself?" I stood, trembling. "Who are you?" Another whisper. "I am what's left when the leaf forgets itself." I backed away, but the altar exhaled. The cloth lifted, and I saw, carved deep into the underside of the stone, "This is not where prayers rise. This is where they are buried." The next morning, I peeled back the altar cloth. A same hairline, human-made. I called the carpenter. He refused to enter. "Open that," he said, backing away, "and you'll never stop hearing." I opened it anyway. Underneath an empty cavity, hollow, but not clean. Inside were mouths, down scenes of them, carved into the stone, some wide, some stitched, some mid-scream, everyone frowning in agony. And in the center, a relic I never authorized. A tongue, not stone, not wood, flesh, preserved, still wet. I reached for it. A breath touched my hand. You preach with a voice you stole. I stumbled back, slammed the lid shut, and vomited near the pulpit. The whisper followed me to the rectory. You think you speak for him, it said, but he no longer speaks. Later, I asked Sister Marla about the altar. Her eyes didn't blink. You opened it. I had to. You'll hear your name until your soul forgets it. That night, I dreamed of the mouths. They weren't screaming. They were singing a lullaby in reverse. And at the center, a child holding the preserved tongue, trying to place it inside my mouth. I woke to find a message scratched into the chapel floor. Fresh, carved deep, not by hand. Idith, preach again, and the tongue becomes yours. I haven't held mass since, but the altar still whispers. And each night, its voice becomes more familiar, because now it sounds like me. Episode 8, The Bible That Rewrites Itself. It began with a single verse I didn't recognize. Then it began writing names, men, dates. Every church has a pulpit Bible, heavy, secret, anchored in centuries of breathless belief. Ours Saturday beneath the crucifix, unopened during daily hours, untouched by anyone but me. I kept it bookmarked to Romans 8:38, a verse of comfort, control, until one morning, it wasn't Romans anymore. The ribbon had moved, the page had changed, and scrawled between printed lines was a new passage, and the shepherd shall kneel, for the flock remembers what he forgot. No chapter, no verse number, just ink wet, black, and pulsing slightly beneath my fingertips. I accused the altar boy. He swore he hadn't touched it. I asked Sister Marla. She only said, "It's remembering again, isn't it?" That night, I took the Bible home, locked it in my drawer. At midnight, I woke to rustling, the sound of pages, flipping so deliberate, like fingers that had long forgotten how to feel. I opened the drawer. The Bible lay open to a verse that hadn't been there before. This one had a name, Elijah M. Thorne, July 19th. My name, today's date. I slammed it shut, wrapped it in linen, and placed it beneath the stone font. I checked it again in the morning. Now there were 4 names, each one carved in ink across the margins, each with a different date, some from the past. I recognized one, Damien Carr, May 3rd, 1951, the priest who confessed to me from the grave. Another was dated just 3 days from now, Sister Marla, July 22nd. I confronted her. You knew, I said. She looked tired, not afraid. It's not a book, she whispered. It's a memory. A memory of what? She looked up at me. Of everyone who stayed past midnight and wasn't supposed to. I returned to the church that night, placed the Bible on the altar, and watched. At exactly 12 a.m., the pages turned on their own. They stopped on Revelation, but the words weren't from any version I'd studied. They spoke of things not yet written, of fire rising from the floor, not the sky, of prayers feeding something older than heaven. And the known final name appeared, not written, etched, burned into the page like a brand. God, August 13th. I flipped ahead. Every page beyond that was ash. I don't preach anymore. Not from that Bible. Not to those who pretend they can't hear the pages turning. But I know this. It's not prophecy. It's documenting, one soul at a time, one page at a time, and soon, one God at a time. Episode 9, The Candle That Cries. It never goes out, even when there's no flame, and its tears know the names of the missing. It's Saturday on the left side of the altar. A simple white candle. I never lit it. No one did. It simply was, always flickering, always watching, and every night, around 12:07 a.m., it began to cry. Not wax, not oil, but slow, heavy drops clear as water, thick as grief sliding down its body like tears that had waited centuries to fall. One night, I touched one. It burned, not like fire, like memory. Suddenly, my lungs filled with cold river water. My fingers trembled with the sensation of being buried alive. I saw flashes, faces I didn't know, but they knew me. When I came to, I was kneeling, weeping, and the candle was dry again. I asked the altar boy if he'd seen it cry. He looked down. I count the tears sometimes. He said, each one is a name. A name. He nodded. Of those the church won't speak of. Those it keeps. I returned that night, alone, with a notebook. At 12:07, the first tear fell. then another. I recorded them, counting 11 in total. I looked up, ready to leave, and saw a new face in the stained glass window. Not an angel, not a saint, a boy, mouth open, eyes stitched shut, wearing the same robes as our altar boy. I ran back to the rectory. His bed was empty, his shoes still wet. A single note rested on his pillow, written in jagged childlike handwriting. The candle remembers, so must you. I lit every candle in the chapel, but only that one cried. At dawn, I tried to remove it. It wouldn't budge. Its wax had fused into the stone. The next night, I counted again, 12, and one drop fell directly on the open Bible. It sizzled, and where it landed, a name bloomed. Elijah Thorne pending. I haven't slept since, because I understand now. The candle is not mourning. It's marking each tear a tally, each drop a soul. And when it stops crying, it means it's done waiting. Episode 10. The locked room no one built. There's a door inside the church. No hinges, no handle, no record of its existence, but it's locked from the inside. It started with a draft, cold and unnatural. Not from a window there were none open, not from the doors that were bolted, but the wind whispered through stone. I traced it to the far eastern wall of the church behind the organ, where dust clings like regret. And there it was, a door, perfect rectangle, seamless frame, no knob, no keyhole, just there, as if the wall had remembered it too late. I searched every blueprint, every record from the diocese. The door wasn't listed, not in the original plans, not in the renovations of '67, not in the emergency report from the fire of '91. But when I asked Sister Marla, her lips went pale. You saw it, she whispered. Yes. Then you've already been inside. That night, I brought tools, chisels, a flashlight, a prayer book. I traced the edge of the door, hoping to find some weakness. And that's when I heard it breathing from the other side, not gasping, waiting. I pressed my ear to the wood, and it whispered, "Welcome back." I should have run. Instead, I touched the center of the door. It was warm, and it pulled, not physically, spiritually, like gravity for the soul. I blinked, and the world went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was standing inside the room. No windows, no ceiling, just mirrors, down scenes, all facing me, each one reflecting something slightly wrong. In one, I was smiling too wide. In another, I had no eyes. One showed me praying while something stood behind me, fingers digging into my shoulders. And in the center mirror, there I was, wearing robes far older than my own, mouth moving, reciting words I had never learned. Behind the reflection, the congregation was burning. I screamed, and the mirror shattered except the center one. It smiled and said, in my voice, "You left the door open once before. We've been waiting." I fell backward. The door behind me opened, light spilled in. I crawled out into the church, back to the organ. The wall was whole again. No door, no seam, only a deep, black handprint where I touched it. Back in my quarters, my prayer book was gone, replaced by a mirror, a small one, and in it, I saw the church, burning from the inside out. There is no door in the church, and yet, something still breathes behind that wall. And some nights, if you're quiet, you'll hear a mirror crack. Episode 11. The choir that never stops. They died in fire. But every night at 12:15, their voices return, singing a hymn that should never be heard alive. It was the smell that woke me. A smoke, sweet, sickly, and decades old. The kind of sin that doesn't rise from fireboat from memory. I rushed into the sanctuary. No flames, no heat, only the sound of singing. High voices, pure children, a hymn I had never heard before, soft at first, then climbing, note by note, until it wrapped around the rafters like ivy and choked the silence. The choir loft had been sealed since 1975. Burned, collapsed, condemned. The last time it was used, 12 children sang their final mass. The fire started mid-verse. No one escaped, only ash and a scorched crucifix that still leans jarred and cracked against the back wall. I climbed up anyway. The ladder groaned under my weight with splintering, as if resisting the return of the living. Halfway up, I felt warmth, not welcoming. Humdry, the hymn grew louder. No instruments, no accompaniment, only voices and something beneath them. A second harmony, low, whispered, inverted, like something else was singing with them. Something not a child. At the top, the air shimmered, not with light, with memory. I stepped into the blackened loft and saw them, 12 shapes in faded choir robes, standing exactly where they had stood when they died. Faces hidden in shadow, mouths open, singing in perfect, breathless unison. One of them turned toward me, a small hand extended. It held a piece of sheet, music half burned, the notes dripping off the page like wax. I took it, my fingers blistered instantly. Words appeared across the staff. Sing this aloud, and they'll know you remember. I tried to speak, but my voice wasn't mine. Something was inside it, inside me. I dropped the page, and every child stopped singing at once. 12 heads turned toward me in perfect silence. Then one whispered, "You heard us die, and you did nothing?" I fell backward down the ladder, woke on the chapel floor, bleeding from the nose. Ears ringing, the hymn still echoed in my skull. Only this time, I understood the lyrics. They weren't praises, they were names, each line naming someone who had stayed past midnight and forgotten why they came. My name was the final note. I sealed the choir loft the next morning, with nails, with prayer, with salt. But tonight at 12:15, the hymn began again, softer, closer, and now, I swear I hear a 13th voice, trying to match their pitch, and it sounds a lot like mine. Episode 12. The priest who came before. He left no body, no grave, only a journal that ends with a sentence no priest should ever write. God is no longer here. I found the journal behind the altar, wedged beneath a loose stone tile. No dust, no mold, as if someone had placed it there yesterday, not 70 years ago. The name etched on the inside cover chilled me more than the ink. Father Damien Carr, the same name that appeared in the living confessional, the same man who whispered from beyond the grave. The first entry was dated March 3rd, 1951. The final entry, May 3rd, 1951 The night he vanished. His handwriting was clean, sharp, like someone trying desperately to stay in control. But the words, they spiraled. The first pages documented routine things, not schedules, repairs to the bell rope, a broken chalice. But then, page 17, the door is back, the one without hinges. It opened last night on its own. Page 22, the children's voices don't stop. They sing when the wind dies. They sing in my sleep. Page 31, the candle weeps again. For who? I can't say, perhaps for me. And then page 38, only 2 words, scrawled violently. He's listening. But it was the final entry that unraveled me, written in ink the color of dry blood. There's something beneath the church. It's not hell. It's older than hell. It remembers what God has tried to forget. He doesn't answer Horrenda because he won't, but because he can't. I'm going down there. I've heard the bell. I've heard the choir. I've heard my own voice whispering things I never believed. If I don't return, bury this journal in silence. And if you find it, run before the church knows your name. I closed the journal with trembling hands, and that's when I heard it, a sound I had never heard before. Footsteps, coming up from beneath the altar, not loud, but dragging, like someone carrying chains. I ran to the back chamber, where the old stone crypt lay sealed, or should have been. The seal was broken, the heavy lid cracked. Inside, only darkness and the faint scent of smoke and incense. I leaned in, and a voice echoed up. Elijah, soft, familiar, my own voice, calling to me from below. I dropped the journal, locked the chamber, but when I returned later that night to retrieve the journal, it was gone. In its place, an open Bible, the only verse marked, "And the shepherd shall be struck, and the flock scattered," written beneath it burned into the page. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The church doesn't forget its priests. It recycles them. And now, I can't feel them forgetting me. Episode 13, Mass for the Dead. They came dressed in black. Saturday in silence. And when I began the liturgy, I realized no one alive was listening. It began with the bells. They rang on their own, 12 times, at exactly midnight. No hands on the rope, no one in the tower, just sound and shadows gathering. I stepped out into the sanctuary, and for the first time since I arrived, the pews were full. Men, women, children, all dressed in black, veils, gloves, still as statues. No one spoke, no one blinked. They had come for a funeral, but no casket stood before the altar, only the open Bible and the candle that cried. I should have turned and walked away, but my legs betrayed me. I climbed the pulpit stairs, heart thudding, hands cold, and when I opened my mouth, Latin flowed out. Not mine, not words I knew, but something deeper, older, a funeral mass for souls that had already vanished. The congregation didn't flinch until the Kyria, then they wept, not tears, ash. Midway through the liturgy, I dared look up. That's when I realized they weren't sitting, they were floating, a few inches above the pews, dangling, hanging in midair like forgotten marionettes, and their mouths were sewn shut, all except one, the altar boy, who stood in the aisle, barefoot, eyes pale and wide, and whispered, "You called them, Father?" And they answered. I dropped the Bible, the air snapped like a broken spine, and the congregation stood slowly, feet never touching the floor. They began to walk forward, one by one, no footsteps, no breath, their arms outstretched it toward me, toward the altar. They circled it, and as they did, the candle flared. The pages of the Bible flipped wildly, faster and faster, until they caught fire, and from within the flame, a voice sang, a choir, 12 children, one priest, all singing the requiem. For me, I fell to my knees, begged, prayed, screamed, but the mass continued, and the dead did not leave, not until the final word was spoken, a word I had never read before, a name, Fornell, not Elijah, something older, something mine. When I woke, the church was empty, Bible gone, pews charred, and written in soot across the altar cloth, "You have now buried the living, only the dead remain to listen." I haven't spoken since that night, not a sermon, not a whisper, because now I know who the final mass is for, and I'm the only one left to give it. Episode 14, the door that opens both ways. It doesn't open to let you out, it opens to let something in, and once it's open, it remembers who touched it. There's a door behind the altar. Everyone in town says it's always been there, but I know it hasn't, because last week it was stone, and now it's wood, black, wet, breathing. It has no handle, but it pulses like it has a heartbeat. Mine, it began knocking last night, 4 slow thuds at midnight, the kind of knock that doesn't ask for permission. It warns. I placed my palm against it. It was warm. Then the whisper started, not from behind it, from inside me, a voice that sounded like mine but older. "You opened the door the night you stayed. Now you must open it again, from the inside." I dreamt of it that night. I was standing on the other side, looking out into the chapel, watching my own body lead mass for the dead, watching as I raised the wafer, and the wafer bled. I tried to scream, but the door shut between us, and when I woke, my hand was stained with communion wine I never poured. I returned to the church before midnight. The door was gone, or rather, it moved. Now it stood at the back of the nave, call, waiting, and above it, carved in Latin, Ego Iram Antiquum Fides. I was before faith. I set up a mirror opposite the door, and at 12 sharp, it opened, but not in, out. From the mirror, I watched a figure step forward. It wore my collar, my face, but its eyes were full of smoke. It looked around the church and whispered to the pews, "He still believes, but not for long." Then it looked straight at the mirror, at me, and smiled. I smashed the glass, ran to the door, but it had shut again. This time, carved into the wood was a keyhole, and beneath it, my tooth, freshly pulled, still bleeding, still warm. Now the door appears in different places, sometimes behind the pulpit, sometimes inside the confessional, once in my own room. It never knocks anymore, because it no longer needs to. It's already seen what's inside me, and it's waiting to come back through. Tonight, I will open it, because I have to know what I let in. I have to know what part of me stayed behind the first time. But if I don't return, if the door opens again and you see me walk through, don't let me speak, because it won't be me that's talking. Episode 15, the night haven't closed finale. At midnight, the door opened for the last time, not to hell, not to heaven, but to something God himself abandoned. I opened the door, not with a key, not with prayer, but with silence, because by then I had stopped asking God to answer, and he had stopped pretending he could. The door creaked like bone snapping under weight. It opened inwardly, just into space, but into memory, not mine, his. The church exhaled. The air turned bright, not with light but with knowledge I was never meant to carry. I stepped through, and everything went black. No floor, no sky, just a void filled with whispers that didn't echo. Around me stood the congregation, those who had stayed. The altar boy with hollow eyes, Sister Marla, mouth sewn shut, Father Damien, split between diversions of himself on weeping, the other grinning, and behind them, the choir, burned, floating, still singing, but now the hymn was reversed. Not a prayer, a command. I walked toward the altar. It wasn't made of stone anymore. It was flesh, pulsing, breathing, and atop it lay a book bound in skin that trembled when I got too close. It opened itself, and on the first page, written in trembling hand, "Let there be silence." Suddenly, the bells rang, but not from above. From beneath me, the tower was gone. The steeple had crumbled, and the stained glass windows began to bleed like blinding, jagged beams that poured outward, not inward. And then the sky ripped, not like paper, like heaven had shut its eye. One last blink, one final, merciful refusal. The pews vanished, the walls peeled, and the church became mouth. Rows of pews turned into teeth. The crucifix twisted. Christ stepped down it to save, but to look away, and he whispered as it passed me, "This place was never mine." I tried to scream, but my voice stayed inside the book, written as the final verse, Elijah M., thorn witness, and beneath it, no longer priest, no longer man, only memory. I woke on the church steps, alone. The building behind me was gone, not burned, not collapsed, just erased. Only the ground remained, blackened in the perfect shape of a cathedral. At the center, a candle, still crying, and on my tongue, a word I do not know in any language, but when I speak it, mirrors crack, candles go out, and for a moment heaven flinches. So now I walk, from town to town, church to church, because the door is not gone. It's looking for new walls, new names, and someday soon, it will ask to be open again. And when it does, don't answer, because once it opens, even God will know how to close it.